everyone. Happy Monday. I am Christina Malyan from Malyan Law out here in Los Angeles, California. I know my little icon may say a different name. I'm using Karina Karajan's Zoom account because Jeremy and I had technical difficulties with my Zoom, and this has happened before. So welcome to 2020. We're rolling with the punches, but we wanted to make sure we brought this live to you. And I thank my good colleague and friend, Garnet, who's an amazing debt settlement and bankruptcy attorney and also does mediation for all you PI attorneys and employment law attorneys. So you better use her. But I want to thank her. So welcome to Christina Live as it could be, where I have been inviting different guests and professionals to speak on different topics, especially during COVID. As many of you know, I practice in personal injury, specifically in representing individuals who were injured in car accidents. And I also draft estate planning documents like your wills, trusts, medical directives, and power of attorneys, and much more. Tonight's live is very important given that it being the first of its nature. If you're a business owner or have a business owner or know a business owner that has been affected by COVID, whether their work was fully or partially closed due to the pandemic, this is the program for you. As always, this program is for educational purposes only, and we're here to provide consumers with guidance and knowledge. Tonight's live is also special because it's geared towards our fellow colleagues, our attorney colleagues, who may be interested in representing business owners and businesses who have lost income. And we're here to provide you with a roadmap and even more so offer sample demands, complaints, and much more, which we're going to get into. So please feel free to share this with your friends. There's a share button on our Facebook page. Share, like, comment, ask questions throughout, and see if anybody could benefit from this program. With that said, I want to welcome my guest tonight, who is Jeremy Tissot, a seasoned attorney who has been practicing for quite some time. Now, Jeremy's experience is important given that he was once on the other side of the fence, as in he was on the defense side as a partner, providing legal guidance, work, and advice on coverages. Why this is important is because tonight's topic and tonight's live is all about coverage and your policy. With that said, welcome Jeremy to Christina Live. Please introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about you and briefly why we're here before we delve into the nuances as I start sharing it on our Facebook.
Okay, Christina, thank you. I'm glad that we finally are live.
Yeah, me too. Talk about being as raw as it can get.
Yeah, right. All the tech people went home for the night. So yeah. Anyways, it's very good to be here, Christina. I know we've been talking about this for some time, and it's a really important topic because people are going through so many things right now. And so, my background is just that, without going on too long about it, is I did work for the evil empire at some point. In that I was a partner at a defense firm, pretty large defense firm, for a number of years. And in that time, I was kind of cultivating my way out of there by doing some plaintiff work too. And now I almost exclusively do plaintiff work, except for perhaps a few friends or small business owners that I can help with some real righteous cases. And so, in doing that, there's a lot to be said about practicing only on the plaintiff side and being a true believer in that. But you do learn a lot from what goes on in the tricks of the trade from the other side of the fence. So, I did that for several years, and then I started my own law firm based out of Beverly Hills, but with several offices, including in San Francisco and Orange County. And so we're handling these cases, but I handle a number of different types of civil litigation, including serious personal injury cases, business litigation, and employment cases, but as well as class actions. And so my background was representing insurance companies, and also doing insurance defense and some pretty large cases with a lot of exposure. And what, you kind of learn the inside as you've seen, that insurance companies will do just about anything, find a way to deny a claim or to pay as little as they can. And people still think, even business owners, that I paid for my coverage, I should make a claim. Somebody's going to take care of me. They're going to figure it out, right?
Oh, are they going to learn too soon and too quick that that's not the case until you get an attorney?
Right. So I think and I think more so even business owners think it's less frequent, and you may get in an accident once every couple of years, but for business owners or even homeowners, we're talking about business policies here. You know,
Right.
a lot of these people have paid for years and they haven't needed these things. We don't live in it, you know, unless you maybe, you know, for your home, you might have a fire, but we haven't had like really a big earthquake here or catastrophe. And now we have all these things going on. And of course, now's the time for the insurance companies to pay up, and they're going to try not to. So,
Absolutely. So also, I know you've been so kind enough to offer our colleagues and your experience and be guidance should they tune in and ask questions and then reach out to your office for sample demands and complaints. So I'm really excited for us to get into that. So as Jeremy said, insurance companies are there to essentially provide you coverage and to be able to pay for claims that you make under your policies, whether it's automobile, whether it's homeowners or business insurance. Tonight, we're specifically focusing on business insurance. And with that said, I want to dive in straight into Jeremy. Let our viewers know, and especially our business owners, what is business insurance? Like, where should they start? Where should they look? What's going on? And then we're going to get into the nuances as much as we can.
okay. So, you know, even though people are business owners and they tend to be, say, more sophisticated sometimes in matters of insurance than the average homeowner would be, or car owner, policy owner, a lot of people just don't realize like the basics of what they bought. So, you know, if you're buying a general business policy, a lot of times you're thinking about like liability or fires or things like that.
Right.
So you're not thinking so much about this. And, you know, yeah, if you had a fire or an earthquake and you had that coverage, or if you had some sort of, it does come up frequently in fires or some sort of issue where your business suffers clear physical loss or damage. And sort of like the whole trigger point here and the whole issue at hand is this physical loss or damage issue.
Okay.
And so people, they know they bought a policy and they know they have some sort of coverage, but they really don't know what's in there. They may know that they have higher limits or that, but almost always, even as you see in like when you're dealing with, I'm sure when you're dealing in auto cases, people don't really realize what's in there until they have someone look at it and we tell them, right?
And when you say look at it, are you referring to like a specific document? Like, for example, for auto, we typically start with the declaration page. Is that where you would recommend people to start, or
so what we need people to get is so business owners are contacting me, or they're contacting other attorneys, or even maybe attorneys that may not even be doing this, and they're just asking about this. And it's kind of the triggering point for this whole thing has been, I had people contacting me when they knew that I had some background in this area that was handling these cases and saying, oh, well, I didn't think I had any coverage because I called my agent and my agent told me there's no coverage at all. And they said things like it was excluded, or it was a virus exclusion, or, you know, this can't possibly be covered. How would they cover this? No one anticipated this. No one covers pandemic. And so to answer your question, though, the starting point for this is some of these, you need to ask the agent. The client can do it. In most cases, if you're a business owner, you can go to your agent or broker and ask for this. And they're usually really cordial, but they're not going to provide you with any legal advice, nor should they. And in this instance, I'm not saying, you know, there's a lot of really good insurance agents out there, and this is not to disparage them, but more so in this than you would see, say, in an auto accident or a homeowner's claim, you're seeing agents, commercial agents, just outright telling people that there's no coverage. And there was actually a letter issued to the insurance companies by the insurance commissioner in April, telling them to stop doing this, basically. And so we see that probably the major carriers, among them, a lot of these policies were written by the Hartford, Liberty Mutual. It just depends where you are. We believe, although there isn't evidence of it, that there was a mandate put out to agents just to tell people it doesn't exist. I mean, their take on it initially was, this is going to be some crazy flood of litigation. How could we possibly handle this? But to go back to your question, these policies, you generally need to ask them, the agent, for a certified copy of your insurance policy and declaration pages. And very often that is a 120-page document. So this is not like your auto policy that's like a little booklet that's like you could even have in your car, you could flip through. So and they vary, and people get overwhelmed by it, and the agents know nothing about what's in there really. They sometimes know about the different coverages, but they don't know about this important language that's in there that varies.
Right.
And so that's the starting place. And we can, in some instances, we can contact if we're retained, we can contact the agent and we could talk to them and get that. And then it goes to the adjuster. So in some instances, people made claims like business owners, and then the adjusters just told them outright there's no coverage.
Right.
But
before we get into that, thank you so much. We have about 45, 46 people tuning in. Jeremy and I, we planned a unique discussion for today, and we're going to break it up into two parts. The first part is going to be for business owners. The second part is going to be for attorneys. If you are a business owner or know that somebody could benefit, I want everybody to give us 2 thumbs up or just write business owner. That way we can gauge how many of each category of individuals there are. Also for my attorney colleagues, our attorney colleagues, likewise, if you can just say attorney here or 1 thumb up, please let us know, because it will actually help guide us. Like always, I welcome and questions so that we can ask Jeremy, and if we don't have the answers, we'll be able to provide it. Back to you, Jeremy. Back to the fact that don't listen to your adjusters and don't listen to your agents or brokers. Unfortunately, they're not in a position as you are in to read some of these 200-page policies in order to find little, not little, but very important and crucial ways of how to provide coverage, correct? So that's the essential bottom line. Now, what types of businesses have you seen that are being affected through, the pandemic, that we're in a lockdown?
Yeah, so what's interesting is, even when I have either colleagues of mine, friends, former clients, even people are pretty sophisticated business owners, they just didn't really realize that this might be available to them. And they were also just worrying about a lot of other things. I got a lot of calls, like a lot of attorneys, in the first few weeks after Governor Newsom's stay-at-home order, right around that time or even before that. People were just they were literally asking me, like, do you know anything about what I'm going to do? Because my business is going to really be hurting. And a lot of it was like, well, I'm not, I'm not a loan officer or an agent for that. So, but people call upon us to help them in their time of need. And so we saw a lot of panic at that time, where people were wondering if there was any options, and that this was not an option they had thought of. They've been paying a lot for premiums for their business. They probably had made little or no claims for years, and they never really thought of this. And then they started hearing of the CARES Act, which is these PPP loans included. And they thought to themselves, well, I'll just get recovery through that. So
let's break it down, because I have had different attorneys and I've spoken about the PPP loans. The PPP loans essentially are to address payroll, right? The word payroll is in the acronym PPP loans. They're here to address payroll. That is an expense. But what you're talking about specifically, Jeremy, you're talking about income, which is profit, hopefully.
Right. So there is an issue about, we might get into this later, but because of people started getting these loans, whether they were SBA loans, they were under the CARES Act. And again, we're not here to talk about that specifically. Okay. And it's not either of our areas of specialization, but it was to pay payroll costs, and there's a forgiveness aspect to that based on if you actually do that and prove that. And it's also under the CARES Act, they were there to pay things like mortgage, rent, utilities, things of that nature. And so in terms of, to answer your question about the businesses we saw, I represent owners of restaurants going back a number of years, and happen to have a lot of friends in that industry. And so that was an obvious one, right, that we would see.
Right.
But even law firms, we saw law firms that went into like a panic about this. Small law firms, solo law firms. There were, personal injury lawyers. Just wasn't a lot of activity, right? We all knew there wasn't much going on. So as a result, even if your business was open or could be open, there wasn't anybody coming in your door. And so there is your income loss right there. It's an interruption. So you could even have your business opened. For instance, my law firm was allowed to be open. My building was open, but people weren't necessarily coming in. I mean, it turns out that we had different things that we could do and a lot to work on. But a lot of lawyers were concerned about like doctors or medical
Doctors
officers?
are treating physicians who had to switch gear and go into telemedicine and figure out all that. But for a period of time, a week, 2 weeks, they didn't have people walking in, and they still don't. There's plenty of clients that are still afraid to go back to a doctor's office.
It's huge. I was actually surprised by that to some degree. I had heard about the fact that what really was interesting is it's not just a few weeks. It went on for a really long time. And even now, there's people who just will never go back to like a doctor unless it's an emergency. And
Right.
so, or they just aren't going to do it. And it's just because, for one thing, it's not like going in a store. They feel like they're going to catch the virus if they go to a doctor.
I mean, doctors' offices have that presence of germs or whatever, so
Some do. Some more than
another
others.
level of scrutiny. So again, if you're an attorney joining in, thank you so much. Jeremy's here to provide us guidance as attorneys, as PI attorneys, how to do some of these claims. But if you're a business owner and just tuning in, this is for you to learn that if you have business insurance, you need to pull your policy and read it. And if you can't have it read, contact an attorney who is practicing in this area. We will be gladly read this for you. I know it's a little daunting and the language may not be lay terms, so we are here to provide that to you. Jeremy, so that's partial closing, right? So there's doctors' offices and lawyers' offices, even restaurants that remained open and went did alternative means of like takeout or curbside pickup, but they may still be eligible to contact our office and find out if there's a partial income loss.
Right. And so if you think about it, it's like almost every business. I mean, there was hardly anything that was allowed to be open for a while. And then even now, it's had an impact because people just are not doing things the same way. Do you see it? It's like, we thought that people would all of a sudden go into restaurants because they hadn't been out in so long. But when you go into a restaurant, it's like a sanitized process. It's not entirely enjoyable. I think that's the way it is for a lot of things. Also, people have adapted. Like a lot of law firms even, or other businesses, have people still working at home even when they could go back. So I think that it's like almost across the board that you're seeing this. I just want to say one other thing about reading the policy. This is a daunting task to read these policies, even if you're an attorney and you like to read. So I'll tell you who's not reading them is your insurance agent. And, it's going to take somebody in the coverage department at the insurance company who's going to tell you, they were just issuing denials on these cases across the board, or they were issuing like reservation of rights. So basically what they were saying is we're going to deny this, or we need more time to investigate, and using other language like that. So you can't, you just need to request the policy, the entire policy, ideally a certified policy in the deck page, and then get it over to us, and we'll look at it on a complimentary basis initially, just to see if the coverage is there. Because in most people think, a lot of times they think, well, I have liability coverage, like if the place burns down or something, but I don't have that. Why would I have that? And when they hear from an agent that they don't have a good claim, they think, oh, that makes sense, right? This never happened before. So
this is very unique. It's one of a kind, and it's definitely first of its kind. So that's why we're here. And I know you've been saying that you've been talking to attorneys across the nation and just trying to find ways or, brainstorm. So you provide, and you have the slew of guidance and colleagues that you can tap into in these resources.
Right. I'm always a big believer in that. I never try to do it myself. So fortunately, even though I have some people listening in, I have a lot of just really great friends that we rely on in the business. We're a team together to fight the insurance companies. And I work with not only people that are in California, but some of these landmark cases were brought by attorneys in Louisiana, Florida, Illinois. And I talk to these people and I listen to what they're saying. And I've got like a list here of all the cases, the COVID-19 cases. And this is actually something that's available to any attorneys that contact me, or however you want to do it, Christina. These were all the cases that were filed since March 15th that were spurred by COVID-19. And they're federal and state cases. And you can actually click on the link. But I think the point that we were getting back to earlier is, what businesses does this affect? And you may not think it's your business. But for instance, having dealt with, like you do, having dealt with healthcare providers in my business, I realized that some of them, when a few had contacted me, a lot of them just didn't realize this, that they had this available to them. And so I know, for instance, one doctor who saw 50 patients a day, who saw 50 patients a day for 10 years. And from March until at least beginning of June was seeing like 10 to 15. Okay. Yet, and then, so so we see this, it's almost every industry. And obviously there's going to be bailouts, or there are bailouts for some of the larger companies, right? But for most of the average small business owners, they're relying on some of these PPP cover or loans. And the problem with that is those could run out, number one. Number two, you may not qualify for the forgiveness. And like we talked about, I'm not here to give advice on that, but I think one of the things that we're concerned about is that people are lulled into a false sense of security here. I noticed that in the first few weeks after the stay-at-home order, I got lots of calls, like a lot of panic calls generally from clients, like, you're a lawyer, can you help me? What should I do? I think everything's just the floor is going to drop out from beneath me. Well, I get probably less of that because people got these loans and they're sitting feeling a little good right now about themselves. Well, we don't, again, Christina and I are very optimistic people for our clients.
Yeah.
But we don't know what's going to happen in September when the money runs out on the loans and the pandemic is still there. So, as an example, I was in Arizona, the Apple stores opened up there, and then they just closed up a couple days ago. So this isn't over yet, and you can't just rely on these loans themselves.
Yeah.
I think you need to look at the coverage you paid for, and maybe let attorneys, not necessarily myself, but attorneys that are qualified in this area, do the work here to figure out if you deserve this, or if you're entitled to it, right?
We have a comment coming in, and it's exactly to your point, where it says, I didn't qualify for anything and we are really suffering. And this is essentially, if you are a business owner and you do have business insurance, this is the program where we're saying, please, let's look into your business insurance policy in order to be able to see if there's a way we can get you some income loss. So when should business owners take a look into this? Should they wait? Is this something that has like a statute of limitations of filing? What would be your recommendation? How soon to start?
Well, so starting point is now. The problem is that people delay on this. I've had a few clients or potential clients that said, I'll get on this. But look, there's a lot of distractions right now. On the other hand, some people have additional time on their hands because they're not in the office normally. But this is a thing people are delaying on because of the fact, in some cases, and again, I know you asked about someone who hasn't received any loans yet, but people are delaying on it because they have this sense of comfort by receiving some of the CARES Act compensation. And so that may be repayable. Also, what we're seeing is now's the time to make the claim. And here's another reason why. Is because a lot of people had loans that were deferred, mortgages deferred, rent that supposedly didn't have to be paid, and other things that were forgiven or really forbeared for a period of time. What concerns me, not an economist, but what concerns me is that people have this false sense of security that they didn't have to pay things for a while. Well, this is something you're entitled to because it's not a loan, okay? And it's not a deferment or a forbearance, which you'll profit from somewhat, in the sense that like you'll feel some comfort for a while. This is something you paid for by your premiums.
And you pay month after month, year after year, in order to get the benefits under your policy. It's written or implied in your policy, right? And
it is, but it doesn't look anything like what you see in an auto policy, that the average person can look at that and go, okay, I sort of get that. And those are purposely written most of the time so that they're really consumer friendly. They were required. There's something called the ISO that they're required to be written in a certain way, and they're fairly uniform. But there's a thought that with business owners, you're more sophisticated. You have the ability to retain counsel or attorneys, and you should be able to, get somebody to read that and make your case for this. And so that's why, insurance commissioner Laura had to issue this order to the insurance companies, in essence, saying you can't play around with this stuff, because there's so many examples of them telling sophisticated business owners that you didn't have this type of coverage. That's not for them to decide. And so they've got it. Any of these business interruption claims, they need to address them and investigate them. Everyone kind of knows that with an auto accident or a homeowner's claim, but they sort of hear this and they go, well, maybe I just didn't have it because it's so complicated. It's so crazy. It's like, I don't know what a civil authority means. And some of these coverages that are listed, for instance, like there's a number of extra income, civil authority, business interruption, and there's a bunch of exclusions. And so sometimes the agent will say that, and that, people don't necessarily know what that means, but they know enough to know that doesn't sound like good news.
You're absolutely right. And to do any of these and to read through the policies, it's a free consultation, right, Jeremy? So all they have to do is pick up the phone, give us a call, and give us the certified copy of their policy. We'll go into the details of what else they're going to need, but essentially that's a good starting point.
Yeah, and sometimes even just getting the copy of the policy, we sometimes can even help with that.
Yeah.
Because it can be a little daunting. Sometimes the agents, I'm not saying they're doing this, but if someone feels like they're already going through a tough time, they've been at home, mentally they may not be feeling it in their best place, and then they're told by an agent that you've got no claim after they have all these losses, they may not be in a position to fight. So in some instances, we've been retained, and if we have the ability to do it, we'll get on the phone with an agent or broker and talk to them about it. And we're not going to tell them how to run their business, but we do want to encourage them to help us get that copy. Usually that copy of the policy, 100+ pages in the declaration sheets with exclusions, is coming into my office right around the time that I'm making an appointment with a client, which is going to be complimentary. I'm usually looking at the policy, flipping through it, because I know what to look for in there, and seeing whether it has these types of coverages and how extensive it is. And some even small business policies have some pretty good coverage. And of course, the insurance company will say that there is no coverage, but there's no exclusion generally for a pandemic in most of these policies, without getting deep into the law stuff here. Okay.
Right. Now that brings me to a good bridge to bring onto the attorney discussion. But right before I do that, do you recommend business owners attempting to make the claim by themselves?
Okay, I think it's particularly hard to do here because unfortunately, in most instances, what's this going to require, not unfortunately, but first of all, the policies are about 120 to 150 pages, sometimes longer. That doesn't include declarations and endorsements. And then beyond that, we're finding out that most of these cases are being denied. Now, there are some policies where there's some portion of it that may be paid under what's called, like, for instance, without getting too wonky here, a civil authority of 30 days where some business was shut down. So they may pay on that, but then people just walk away, right? So you need someone not only go through it, but to craft the letter and help them put together what's called proof of loss. Okay, so very simply stated, you don't have to hire necessarily an expert at that stage, but it's much more comprehensive than generally a homeowner's claim you can kind of make yourself. If you had something happen to your home, you could do that. But this is one area you don't want to try to do it. And you're almost always going to be facing a denial or a partial denial, which is going to mean you have to have someone like us, Christina and I, who actually litigate cases. Right. Don't just accept denials and drop cases.
And honestly, that with that said, is that even if you do it on your own, when you come to an attorney, you might have been damage may have been done. And reversing that process may actually be difficult. And we see that regular cases, let alone these new cases. Now, moving on to our attorneys. So we know that getting a certified copy of the policy is very important, and having a rough basic calculation of the income loss is necessary. How would you recommend PI attorneys who are jumping into this field, who may have not had experience in practicing in this area of law, where do you suggest they begin, and what do you suggest they could do?
Okay, so there are first party attorneys, that's all they do.
Right.
And there may be, so a personal injury attorney, for example, could be very qualified to do this if they're willing to do a lot of reading. okay, and a lot of self-educating. And so I think most, for example, personal injury attorneys or other litigators have done a decent amount of reading of policies for things like UIM claims,
Right.
and that's sometimes, and then reading the insurance code. And if you're a real conscientious attorney, you know that stuff and you've done it well. This is a different world. There's a lot more going on, and in fact, it's changing almost by the day. And there's issues of, for instance, like there's issues about the legislative response to this, whether there'll be a pool of money paid to the government to reimburse the insurance companies. There are so many things going on here, and the responses to these suits. So, just getting into the obviously you have to do a proof of loss. The whole, let's just say this, the whole process is first party claims are much different generally, but most attorneys or personal injury attorneys have done some of them in the context of a case. This is just much broader and much more detailed.
So, we've talked about that, how it differs from different PI demands. And what we're talking about to our audience is like the personal injury, car accident demands we make, whether it's to third party, the at-fault party, or tapping into one's underinsured, uninsured motorist claim, or property damage claims regarding fire, earthquake, vandalism, and so on and so forth. But Jeremy, what is the transparency with regards to the preparing this initial demand with
right
into the business income loss?
Yeah, so that's the thing, is like a lot of times when we're doing demands for personal injury cases or for even other types of cases, you sort of hold some things back. You don't have to have everything perfectly documented. We've all gotten back responses that say, we need to continue to investigate, or you haven't cooperated, or we need more documents. Well, here in the insurance, the proper way of doing it is going to be more sophisticated. A proof of loss is going to require things like tax returns. It's going to require probably some forensic accountancy work. So it's quite a bit deeper. And the first party claims, you want to have a lot of transparency in what you're giving them, because you want to be able to say, I gave you all the documentation. I've connected from the dots from A to Z. And now the onus is on you to make a decision about whether there's coverage. And you don't want to be doing that in steps. Now, there is something to talk about responding to either denials or reservation of rights.
Yeah, but before we get into the response, I want to talk and hone in on the initial letter. I think this is very important for the attorneys to know. Would you have any suggestions as to what goes in and what does not go into the initial letter?
Okay, so you have to have, and I can give, if anybody contacts either you or I, we can give some samples of demands that we've done. They're very varied, but you have to have a proof of loss with supporting documents in there. And so that shifts the onus.
You can't make up numbers. You can't say this is what was going to happen. It really has to be more concrete and solid, is what I'm
right. Right. We're not all talking about things like pain and suffering or general damages or anything like that either. So it's just the hard numbers, and they're going to need somebody who can work the numbers, and they're going to need exhibits and attachments with some degree of accountancy that's going to show that. And so I think a lot of attorneys do really good demands on things like personal injury cases, but on these cases, they're first party cases where you have to be extremely transparent. And I think one of the things the problems that happens is that if they have an opportunity to deny these claims on other grounds, other than saying that it's not covered because of the things we could get into, there's a number of reasons. The primary reason they come up with is the lack of physical loss or damage.
So let's talk about that. Why is that a trigger point for coverage? Okay,
so that is the entire trigger point for coverage. And then they're simply is because it's in the policy. It's at the top of the policy. Okay. So so in the section, without getting too wonky about the policy itself, there's a section within a business policy that has for business income. And it also talks about a number of different elements within that, which could be civil authority, business interruption. And within there, the first obstacle you have to clear is physical loss of property, or physical damage or loss to property. And the problem is most people think, and this is a kind of a crazy discussion, but most people think, well, their argument is there wasn't a fire, the roof didn't fall in, right? It wasn't even like a vandalism claim. So we get into this whole discussion about whether this virus on the surface is a physical loss. There's a lot of case law that just indicates that you can make a really good argument that there is. And it's going to, and the big point is that once you get to this point of establishing the physical loss or damage, which is going to, it's hard to controvert because the policies don't exclude it a pandemic generally. Now that's a very oversimplification of this, but it's an interesting thing. That word is generally not used. And so the really important thing that most attorneys know, but that business owners should know, is that the policy is construed generally against the insurer. So if you didn't put it in there, okay, if you didn't put pandemic in there, that we're excluding pandemic, then too bad, you lose. Is the way we're looking at it.
We talked about like 2 weeks ago, where I had a professional agent broker on the program, and he mentioned like right now you have to actually sign off for the Terror Act because terrorism is huge and actually became huge after 9/11, and the insurance companies lost out a lot of money. They had to end up paying, which brings me to my next point. Is there fear that the companies will go bankrupt? Like, is this why they're sending out denial letters?
Okay, so this is, for attorneys, this is really interesting, right? If you haven't heard about this. So when some of these initial cases were filed, including by the French Laundry, and I had filed one of these cases for a healthcare provider, the restaurant owners started filing these because they had these immense losses, right? These are places where no one's doing takeout from a $300, $500 a night dinner place in Napa. And so they're selling, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of wine per week. So they had massive losses. And so, initially what's happening is that you're seeing these type of denials out of hand. They just basically said, this is what the insurance industry basically said. And there was an early call with Trump and some of the initial litigators on this, was that how can we possibly pay this? This would be bigger than tobacco litigation if we had to pay it. And we're going to go bankrupt. And by the way, this was not part of the benefit of the bargain. This wasn't anticipated. Right. Well, if you didn't put it in there that it wasn't to be paid, then the really clear letter of the law is that the burden should not be imposed on the insured to prove coverage. Okay, so what the bankruptcy question is interesting. So there's a lot of things that we thought there might be some legislation that's still in the works that would basically allow for a pool of insurance coverage or a pool to reimburse the insurers when they agree to pay or put in a certain plan. But the fact is that the major insurers, unlike a lot of our potential clients who are small business owners or individuals that may be sole proprietors, those companies are probably, I'm not forecasting here, but those companies like AIG and Hartford, all the companies I fight with all the time and on these cases, are not going to go bankrupt because they're going to be bailed out. And the ones that we see, that our friends that do bankruptcy law see, is the smaller individuals and companies, right? And so they're they're crying wolf on that, and we're not going to operate on that basis. So, but it is an interesting question about the fact that there probably would be some sort of bailout specifically for the claims, not just for the insurance companies. So if they were willing to participate in this, but the other thing to consider is we've heard a lot about how the insurance companies are carrying, this is interesting information for any type of case. The insurance company, a lot of people just get worried in this sort of financial fallout. Is the insurance companies even going to be here, right? Well, the insurance companies were carrying huge profit reserves as it was, and they made a lot of money off the fact that no one was driving. A lot of things weren't happening for a while. They've been making a lot of money for a long time. So when we fight cases, we don't fight the cases with listening to these types of things. We fight on the merits.
Right.
So that's the way we're going to pursue these cases.
To attorneys dealing with denials or other responses like, oh, we need more time to investigate, or we need to investigate this. It's not really a denial, but it's kind of like I'm throwing you a bone, but I'm really taking it back. How do you suggest attorneys deal with that? Because
Yeah.
these are the PD type of claims. So
right. So if you like to just settle cases quickly, and that's the type of operation you have, then these probably aren't the right cases for you. I work with other attorneys and I sometimes co-counsel with them, but at my firm we litigate cases and we try cases, and so you're probably going to have to do that with these cases. Not necessarily try them, but you're going to have to file these cases, and that may change over the course of time here as insurance companies realize that their litigation expenses are going far too high. But initially, you're seeing denials and you're seeing reservation of rights or requests for investigate. We need more time to investigate. That's typically what you would see. And especially if you respond back and you rebut the fact that you don't, the virus exclusion assertions or the lack of physical damage, that's pretty easy to do. And then you get to this point where you're probably going to have to file the case. And then the question comes, what happens with these cases? It's just really crazy because they're being filed in all different ways. And
we're going to get into the filing because I want to move on to the litigation and complaint component. But, just for those tuning in, if they are a business owner, typically how do attorneys work up these cases? What kind of a relationship is it? Is it something that business owners should think about paying an attorney hourly or a retainer, or is it contingency, which means they get paid when there's a settlement at the end?
Right. So all attorneys are free to present their particular arrangements for fees, and so there are generally, as the attorney audience knows, those arrangements are usually either an hourly / retainer where you have to pay a substantial sum up front, and then you're actually paying hourly for the attorney services, or contingency in which you do not pay unless there's a favorable outcome. That's usually a percentage somewhere in the range of about 1/3 to 40%. Right. And then there's also a flat fee arrangement. Sometimes you can have a hybrid of those. Attorneys may choose to handle these cases in a number of different ways, but most of my clients now, I used to work for, like I said, the evil empire and the big companies, but most of my clients are smaller business owners and individuals. Yeah. And there are people coming to me and they're having tough times right now because, they might be getting some loans, but some of them are aware that are deferments that this could run out. So we're here. These cases are almost always going to be done in contingency by good lawyers that are willing to put the fight down and go to the mat.
So essentially that just boils down to, if you're a business owner and you'd like to, have interest to see if you have a business income loss claim, you reach out to a contingency lawyer like Jeremy and myself, our firms, where we review and we give you our opinion whether or not we can pursue the case. And should we continue the relationship and pursue the case, we work for free until we get paid at the end. So with that said, let's move on to the fun stuff, the sexy details of filing the complaint. Now, now I know we're not going to get into the details of a complaint, and I know we have a couple of people asking for templates. Once again, please email Jeremy or myself, and I'll put you in touch with Jeremy to get these complaints and samples out to you. But the biggest thing is people think that they can sue anybody and everybody. And unfortunately, that may be true, but as attorneys, we hopefully look at the facts of what are the damages. So with that said, what recommendations do you have for filing suit? Whether or not should it be a breach of contract issue because we're dealing with policy and language, or are we looking at a declaratory relief? And if you can speak up on that and elaborate a little bit more.
Right. So we've seen all of those things. Some of the first cases that were filed, including the French Laundry case and a number of these major restaurateur cases, were deck relief cases. And the idea of that was that they were trying to get to a judge who could make a decision right away on whether there's coverage or not, right? And so rather than, if we file a case, as you know, Christina, in most civil litigation here in Los Angeles, at least, we're going to be looking at a trial date, 1.5 years out. Now it's going to be even longer, right? Yeah. Everything's going to be extended. Non-civil cases or civil cases that are non-preferential. So, the idea of the deck relief was to try to get a ruling on it. And then you could just kind of cram the damages down the throat of the insurance company, and then you'd know that it was worth the time to spend on these cases. So far, there's been not a lot's happened on that. So, typically it would be a breach of contract cause of action. I mean, I'll just go through some of the things you would see. I mean, everyone has done, it's like first party breach of contract. It's, there's a number of other causes of action, but that's usually the way that you go on these cases. Right. And, hopefully some of these cases are going to go, they've been filed as class actions. So there's a lot to be determined. Like any of this litigation that you'll see, I was involved in some of these pharmaceutical cases. There's probably attorneys on here who know more about this than I do. And that's why I always reach out to some amazing colleagues I have that have done MDL cases, which I have also, in class action, to find out what's going on with these cases. What do you think will happen? How can we steer it in a certain direction? And it's kind of like a daily thing to keep yourself updated on this. So I think you can also bring them, you could bring it as a class action, but I don't think I think the best thing to do is that if you have, like, for instance, if you're a personal injury lawyer, I'm kind of going a bit too far here. If you work with healthcare providers that those are potential clients, right? And so, it may be more than one. Like if chiropractors, for example, or other types of business owners in a certain area that maybe your family or your business or you've represented people on, that whole sector may not even realize that they have claims. Most people are really like the restaurant we've heard a lot about, because those are some of these like big, like media hyped cases with all these famous restaurants. And then, there's a few others like that you would mention, the In-N-Out Burger case. So people always know these things anecdotally, but we see it's like a lot of other businesses that are bringing these cases, but some other sectors that probably aren't, but anyways, to answer the questions, you really just want to try to help your client. So you want to sign on your client, you want to look at the policy, you want to review it and see what you can do for the client. And then you take it from there. And it's not, some of these complaints are like, got one here from, this is one of Joe Cachette's complaints. I mean, this is like a 50-page complaint with 9 causes of action. I'm not sure that you need that on everything, but.
So with the complaints, I know the question comes, should it be in federal court or should it be in state court? What are your recommendations for that?
Wow. So your case can probably be removed to federal.
Determine which forum to be.
So I think that if you're going to be in federal court and you don't, I mean, there's certain rules for removal in federal court, and I won't get into those here. But if you're going to be in federal court and you're not an attorney that practices in federal court, then you really want to associate someone else. And don't you agree, Christina?
I absolutely agree. I mean, I do practice. I've had limited cases in federal court, but absolutely, the rules are not your regular state civil procedure. You have time, you can buy time. Federal court is on their game. So they are on top of everything. And if you don't know the rules like the back of your hand, you are definitely going to be up against an attorney who does. But you mentioned something very interesting, referrals. So what suggestions would you make if you were a new attorney or in this area, somebody's a new attorney? Do you recommend us, flying our own hat and trying to do this by ourselves, maybe contacting you and fellow colleagues, or associating in, or just referring? Like, what is your take?
Yeah, so I think I don't tell people what to do, and you could see attorneys that maybe haven't been practicing that long, and I don't base people's abilities and competence on that. But if you're willing to put in the work and you really want to do a lot of work and reading, then these cases are for you. But if you're not into litigating and a lot of paperwork, then probably not. Even with my experience in various areas, I will often bring somebody in who knows a particular subject matter on a particular case, even if it's the underlying subject matter. So, there's attorney John Hoffling in Louisiana, who is, I think, seen as one of the top practitioners in the area of first party bad faith, and was a leader on these cases. And I think one of the things he told me was that you don't want to take on too many of these cases. Okay, he could probably handle your taking on a lot of PI cases if you got more help, but you're not really going to get a lot of help for these cases. You really need to be willing to work on it and learn it. So look, there are attorneys out there that probably even listening here that I would consider associating with on cases, I would co-counsel on. We want to all work together here to really put the insurance companies on the run. And so
brings us to our discussion because of the big picture, because legislation, right? Legislation is going to come down. And I know you touched upon this a little bit earlier where you said the potential governmental relief and the insurance codes and whatnot. So we want to make some movement. We as in consumer attorneys, we want to make movement in order to show them that you're not just going to slap a denial or, push us away. We're actually going to fight this tooth and nail and come after. So you better reach out to your alternative sources and in order to get some help.
Right. And so, look, the legislators are stuck a little bit because obviously they have the typical pressure from the insurance lobby on this and from big business backing them up that there's not been as much done as we thought would be done. And that's like a longer discussion, but it was thought that early on there might be like a huge bailout fund for them of sorts, or that there might even be an order, like a federal order that just says you have to honor these claims. I mean, even President Trump made a statement like that. And then there was several meetings among some of the powers that be, including one rally in Times Square with some of the top attorneys there, where they were talking about this issue about having this pool wherein the insurance companies would agree to be part of this payouts. And so what it was is they would agree that they would, under a certain scheme, make payouts and then be reimbursed by the government for that. And so that just kind of answers the question, like, what do you do about this argument that, like, if you just pay, if you go after these guys and you assail them, they're not gonna be around anymore. Well, that's not gonna happen. So we generally, like, the legislative response is still developing, but what hasn't happened is there hasn't been like an all out, like, just pay the claim. One of the responses could have been just pay all the claims, otherwise you're going to be violent. You could pass a new insurance code section, a regulation. There could have been an order from Commissioner Lara. Okay, so there have been things guiding them, but nothing like that yet. So,
Jeremy, we have a question. Somebody is asking, Alexandra is asking, can you give us an example of a cause of action, please? Okay.
Well, a cause of action would be declaratory relief is a cause of action.
Mm-hmm.
You could find, but a cause of action generally for this would be breach of contract. Okay, so first party breach of contract, and I'm not a big fan of throwing in a lot of causes of action into a complaint just to like list them all there when you can get the same relief from another one.
Yeah.
But unfair business practices in some places you could have like intentional or fraudulent misrepresentation. So unjust enrichment. I mean, those are examples of causes of action, but these are basically either breach of contract or declaratory relief causes of action. This is a more complicated discussion about how to draft a first party bad faith complaint or a first party breach of contract complaint. So, but that's an example of it, yes.
Which that brings me to a question I don't know, Jeremy. Aren't usually first party claims, like I know on auto claims, UIM, they're arbitration. Does this go outside the scope of arbitration? Because I know we talked about filing state and federal court.
Yeah, these cases are not, I'm not seeing them being removed to arbitration, because I think what you may be talking about more is for instance, like under the insurance code for automobile uninsured motorist UIM cases, right? Yeah. So that would go there.
Okay.
But what you are seeing is, I mean, you're going to see typical removals to federal court where it's appropriate. A lot of these cases are filed in state court for the same reason that you could rightfully bring these cases in state court. And a lot of attorneys don't have a problem bringing cases in federal court, but that's just a typical discussion about. A lot of attorneys also feel like that they're going to be hamstringed a little bit by federal court against a big business.
Right. I think we have a comment or partial question. Let me just read it and see if we can assist. So somebody said, thank you for the eye-opening, giving directions towards loss of revenue due to business mandatory shutdown. But I believe is state bound as California was one of the stricter pandemic unconstitutional rule passing still in effect. So if you're asking for the state of emergency, possibly.
Okay.
Do you understand the question? If
okay,
you can elaborate a little more, we would be able to entertain it. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, I'm not I'm not sure I fully understand the question. I apologize. But what I will say is that in these complaints, there's actually a lot of discussion or background this whole aspect of what occurred in this pandemic, and the orders are actually attached, because one of the arguments that they have is that well, the virus wasn't like on your desk and you could have like gone in your office, or you could have gone in your business.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually have to lay out the basis for the breach of contract. And so there's a lot of, this is an important issue about like what exactly was ordered and by whom and for how long, right? Because,
right.
And this kind of also goes to the issue, if you want to talk about it, Christina, I'm sorry to jump
Which
in.
issue?
You want it goes to this issue about like, this isn't over yet. So I get the feeling that some people have this idea that because we're coming out of this, we're starting to go back to restaurants, that somehow you're not going to, these claims aren't worth bringing anymore. But I mean, again, we're optimists, but these losses are going to continue, and now's the time to bring the claims. So.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. I mean, that you mentioned, because like they're mentioning there might be a second wave, whatnot. So it's definitely something that people need to address right now. Now, something that just popped up into my mind about hooking the agent or broker onto liability should you not have these kind of coverages. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so that's not an area that I brought many cases on. I know there's attorneys that have done that, but that's an area that's being discussed a lot here, because this is such an unfamiliar, strange thing, right? So the whole big insurance company mantra is, well, we never could have foreseen this because it's a pandemic, and there hasn't been anything really like this within our lifetimes. And so I guess that, is part of the argument of the agent or the broker, but that is definitely something that needs to be considered. As an attorney, you need to look at that, because there are policies that I've looked at that have some really lousy exclusions that are really limited on the amount of coverage, and they could have probably just very easily included more. And so, look, it's whether that meets the standard of care, but that is definitely a segment of these cases. If you're interested in learning more about that as an attorney, I have some interesting. So I participated in a couple of different roundtables that consisted of that discussion. It's kind of a separate discussion, right? So the agent broker liability, but it's certainly an area that you shouldn't overlook as an attorney, okay? And that look at what we're seeing just from the agents telling people straight out, or being told to tell people that you don't have any coverage for this. Can you trust them?
No. So,
okay.
I think it's very important to know, and I apologize, I was on my phone because people are tagging me in another post that actually just came in, and the groups that we're a part of, LA Attorney, and somebody's saying, just like, the insurance company is trying to deny my claim because I didn't report a change of address and got married and so on and so forth. We're talking about a simple auto accident case, let alone something that hasn't been existent like the virus and the pandemic. So it's very important, if you just put in a phone call. Consultations, most, hopefully all, are free. We take our time to listen to you, to evaluate your claim, to go through the different type of questions based on our experience and our knowledge, in order to hone in on what the issue is. And like Jeremy said, there are other means of attaching liability, maybe having discussion regarding broker agent liability and whatnot. And Jeremy, I had a call today too, without getting into personal information, but again, it was the business income loss claim tacked on with vandalism and stealing and the looting that was involved soon after, the things started to open up. And unfortunately, a business had been robbed out of merchandise. And sadly to say is that the owner believes that they may not have merchandise coverage, the personal property coverage, but until last year they had it. So then that raises so many other, questions as to who's at fault, should we go after the agent? Should we not? So
right.
It's very important just to put in a phone call, because your
right.
office is available, my office is available, and I'll direct it to the appropriate attorneys who have experience in this. It's not just taking on the case and not knowing what you do, but it's putting the consumers in touch with the right people so that they can benefit, because it goes a long way.
Right, right. And I think that's what your office is great at, because you're going to make sure it gets to the right person. If you're not the right person, and I'm the same way. So we don't take on cases that we don't feel like we're the best attorneys to handle that case. Right. And there's a lot out there and a lot of work to do. So there's plenty of work to go around. But one of the things I want to mention that I don't think we touched on yet is that, remember I was talking about how I felt like as people started to get these loans, and they would get the CARES Act through PPP, or the PPP under the CARES Act, and various other government assistance. In some cases, people were even getting unemployment maybe. So, in their family, then they started to feel this comfort zone. So the question to them became, it's like one catastrophe after another. What do I focus on, right? So, should I now go back to this thing about how I have losses from COVID, or that's getting better? Then I had some vandalism happen too. So keep in mind that, and we touched on this a little bit early, that it's not clear, and you certainly should not assume that because you receive some sort of PPP loan or other government assistance for your business, that you won't have this claim, or it's been denied as an offset. They may attempt to do that. That the law is going to be generally construed. Again, you can't give legal advice on this point without looking at the particular policy. Right. But the law is going to be construed against the insurance company. And if they don't have an offset provision, or that needs to be determined what the implications of that provision are, then you shouldn't just assume that, well, I've got some money now from my loan, I should just forego this because it's not in the forefront.
But like you said earlier, you don't know if you're going to owe those loans back, if they're going to be forgiven. And second of all, they're there to replace stuff that you are currently responsible, account liability that you have, not necessarily income that you used to get in order to pay that. So we're talking about two different areas of, accounts.
But I think people don't see it that way. I think people don't see it that way because I just get a feeling from a lot of business owners that I know that when I talk, that they feel like, well, I've got some money now. Why should I make a claim against my insurance?
So you're just saying they got comfortable. Once the loans came in, everything came in, people got comfortable. Right. Guess what? That comfort zone is only
don't be lulled into that.
Okay. And then what? And then what's going to happen? Like, we're going to be back at square one. So I think Jeremy's point is just attack it sooner. And in the meantime, use up the resources and the governmental aid or whatever programs are out there to help you. But in the meantime, know if you have other benefits you can tap into, especially ones you've paid into. Why pay for it? My whole thing is about car insurance too. Like, why pay into something that you're not going to tap into?
Right. You can comment on this because you're a fighter who fights for people in these auto accidents. And I know you told me that you file almost all your cases, right?
Yeah. So, if they lowball, any car accident cases I have, if they lowball or do not give the true value of the case, I will file. And I have been successful in filing and having zero offers on the table, like Geico. I have no problem suggesting that they will never and almost deny any type of mechanism of injury on a rear end accident case. I file, I serve, I do discovery. Sometimes it goes as quick as discovery right before depositions. I'll settle for the value of the case, or I'll take it all the way. And I've had great mentors in my life, some of who are joining into our program and others from CALA that are always a phone call away. And I thank them. And you were a phone call away just last week when I had a first party examination. So with these resources, yes, we tap into it, we file, we fight, because it's not about just making the money. It's not about that, because if we all just make the money, we're not going to set precedent and we're not going to do right for our clients who pay into an insurance company and they don't pay. So
it's so true. And you're a fighter, Christina. Not everyone is going to want to do that. And I get that. And there's, not every battle needs to be fought, but I know that you're willing to put the work in. And there's a lot of other people that, I just want to thank everyone that before I forget this at the end, there's a number of colleagues of ours who are really inspirational and we help each other, but a number of them have set precedents in certain areas of fighting the big companies, the big insurance companies, and the powers that be. And people like us are inspired by that every day. So we're not here just because, we can settle a case out because we might be able to convince somebody that that's the right number. We want to do what's right here. And we also want to show the insurance companies that you're just going to have a fight on your hands on these cases. The more that settle easily, meaning that we just let them, we take the first offers, because there'll be some offers on these cases as we go along. But these are going to be hard ones to fight, and they're going to take resources. And so don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call any one of a number of people, starting with myself, who can, help find the right resources to fight them here.
Right. And you mentioned a good point. It's not just taking the first offer. Look, as attorneys, we have reputations, we are flagged, we are commented in the insurance index system. They know who's going to fight and who's not. But with that said, I don't want clients to have the expectations or consumers to know that every fight is worth the fight, because sometimes your claim may not just be that much worth it. So at the same time, we want to look reasonable. We're doing justice, and we are there to present the claims as they come. So we can't make a small claim, a soft tissue claim, be a fusion, a surgery claim. You can't do that. We don't pull rabbits out of hats. But we are there to make sure that you at least get something for your soft tissue injury, right? Perspective of mine. Jeremy, before we wrap up, because we're coming close to time, we have a couple of comments and questions I do want to address, because our audience has been wonderful. We still have 34 people engaged on a Monday night. I thank you all for tuning in and always supporting this program. So on the note of insurance, somebody asked, Alexandra actually asked, would homeowners insurance have some type of business income loss coverage? I did cover this issue on my program 2 weeks ago with the agent broker, actually on June 8th, but I love to hear your perspective on that.
I'm glad you did. Why don't you tell me about that? So what we're mostly dealing with here, what we're looking at here is generally business policies. But a lot of people might assume that in some cases, maybe they didn't have, like people basically told me, I have a bunch of policies. I don't know what, and they're fairly sophisticated owners. So the point, I guess, overriding point here is don't assume anything. If you have incurred a business income loss, you believe you can document it, you need to start by talking to Christina or I or another qualified attorney who's handled these cases and have us look at the policy. Well, I'm willing to look at all the policies. I've had even law firm owners contact me and just say, I don't know what policy is myself. It's not your E&O policy, but it's, just give us the policies and then we'll take a look at them. So we're generally, though, we're talking about these very comprehensive business policies that cover both liability, business interruption, business income, and they have So honestly, on the homeowners issue, the general idea is there's some type of coverage. No, it depends again on your policy. Policy is written, and so it depends on what's written in your policy, and your policy may be different from somebody else's. But a lot of us work from home, and a lot of us was forced to work from home. So one of my topics that we discussed with the broker was you may consider taking on a business insurance policy for your home and premises as well. But we were talking more about like personal injury type of cases. So look, if you have any type of policy, send it over. We know how to filter through. If we can't get to it, we'll find somebody to filter through, comb through it, make sure we find it. Look, we do this because if we get to tack onto something and hold on to something and file something, it benefits all of us, because that's how we get paid. As Jeremy said, it's contingency. Yeah. Most of us are. So to us, it's the benefit is to find something. Us telling you that there is no coverage is not a benefit. So, or that we can't do it is not a benefit. But ask around, we're all here. Jeremy, any final thoughts before we discuss where people can reach you at and how we can get in touch with you? Right. I would just say that don't give up on these things. We have a lot going on. We're all facing a lot of challenges. We have people that face these vandalisms. They have this fear of this rioting. The thing as it affects businesses, that's going to impact them. This will continue on. So one of the things that Christina and I like to do, a lot of our other good colleagues, some of which have joined us tonight, is we want to be here as a resource. So we're here, most of the time my phone doesn't ring unless somebody's really got a problem and it's a crisis. So that's what we're here to do. And a lot of times what's standing in the way of resolving that crisis is an insurance company. So pretty much what we do all day is take on them. And that's what Christina does. And we want to try to help you. So let us know how we can do that.
Let us know. So how do we get in touch with Jeremy? How do we get in touch with you?
Okay, so most people are on my Facebook. They can contact me obviously there, but I have a toll-free number, 888-661-0444.
Let's repeat that again.
888-661-0444. That covers all of my offices. My email address is jtissot@tissotlaw.com. jtissot@tissottlaw.com. We'll post this after. What I want to encourage people is to be a resource for each other. So I've got, like I said, a list of cases here with links. I've got complaints, ones that I filed. I've got ones that I like, some I don't like, but I've got a lot of information to share, and I'm happy to get together with anybody in Roundtable on the phone or otherwise. Thank you for having me, Christina.
Oh my God, thank you so much, Jeremy. We got so many compliments. I want to thank you for your vast knowledge and for taking the time. I know we had technical difficulties. In the beginning, you'll notice that I had a colleague's name, but she actually texted me in the midst of it and she told me how I can change my name. So it's a live and learn. We're all here for one another. I know I have a huge backbone of attorneys that I contact myself, and when I get contacted from younger attorneys, I'm happy and honored actually just to provide that to them too. So I know Jeremy is a phone call and a text message away from me on different matters. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. As always, I try to do these every Monday night as much as possible, as many speakers I can bring. COVID has definitely given us some insight about new opportunities and new ventures to branch out to. So if you're an attorney out there who wants to tap into this, do it. Go for it. It's your time to shine. And, as Jeremy said, there's only limited amount his office will take, and is happy to provide resources, templates, complaints, and guidance and mentorship if possible, so that we can do the right work on behalf of it. And once we do that, we will teach the generations to come. With that said, everybody, I hope everybody does well, everybody staying safe and practicing social distancing. Have a great night.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you everybody for tuning in.
Thank you.